government have in state issues with education, for example, certifying school teachers? Should Utah be complying with this act, and do you support it?
Mr. Burridge.
I'm for local control of our schools. I've met hundreds of teachers throughout this campaign. In fact, I've been endorsed by Utah's largest teacher organization. And many of the teachers that I've spoken to have told me about this problem with regard to determining whether somebody is a well-qualified teacher or not. I spoke to a teacher in Beaver once who said she's qualified in one area of science to teach, but because she's a rural teacher, she has to teach 4 areas. And because of No Child Left Behind, she's being penalized for that. We need to have local control of our curriculum. We need to get the federal government out of our curriculum. My opponent voted for No Child Left Behind. I would have voted against it. So did Rob Bishop. We need to have candidates that are going to vote for local control and be consistent on keeping our education local here in Utah.
Representative Cannon.
With one exception, we actually agreed quite a bit on this issue. I voted for it because we had a law in place. There's a reauthorization of earlier law, and at the level of the law, it's actually not a bad law. The problem is that it's been implemented in the most offensive way possible. The amazing thing is that you have the Secretary of Education, Margaret Spellings, refusing to meet with the Superintendent of Education in Utah because she doesn't like the way Utah's handling our education and our approach to the federal government on that, which is why Rob Bishop's taking the lead on this issue to help us change the nature of No Child Left Behind. The bill has been implemented in an abominable fashion. It is not consistent. The department is giving a waiver to this state but not to that state, and a different one to here but not to there. And you have a law that has no certainty, no clarity, and has caused incredible burdens. My daughter was on a mission in New York, and my wife picked her up when she finished her mission. They had dinner with a couple that turned out to be a school teacher. And when he found out I was a congressman, he started ranting about No Child Left Behind. The fact is, every teacher in America hates this bill, and it's not going to be reauthorized in the same fashion. And by the way, if you want to do something about it, go to endfeded.com.
Professor Dessart.
Returning to the issue of Iraq, there's been a lot of discussion over the last few years about whether or not publicly criticizing the president and his policies in Iraq lends aid to the terrorists. It actually hurts us. How do you view that argument as to whether or not, when criticizing the chief executive, whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing?
Representative Cannon.
You know, I think that we should be free to criticize the chief executive, and it's happened forever in America. But the press really blew this out of proportion. The suggestion that being in Iraq has created a greater environment or has induced more terrorists, it was taken out of context. If you read the report, that's not what it meant. The fact is, and this I believe is the bottom line, we're either going to fight these people in Iraq and keep them from gaining a nation state, or they're going to create a nation where they can operate from and have their bases and have their hiding holes, and they will come out and strike us. That's the choice that we have here, and we need to fight them in Iraq.
Mr. Burridge.
You know, America is founded on the principles that we're able to criticize our leaders whenever we want. When I was growing up, my parents taught me about how life was in the Soviet Union, and they used to tell me if you criticized the leaders, you'd have something happen to you that's really bad. And I oppose that. I think the fundamental tenet of America is that we have the right to criticize our leaders and our elected officials. And I'm alarmed by the partisan politicians in Washington that want to create an atmosphere where people are scared to do that. I'm alarmed by some of the positions that the media have taken with regard to not taking an active role of being the fourth estate and asking questions. Nothing ever hurt out of people asking questions, because when you have a strong dialectic, you find the truth. And it's important for us to know the truth when it comes to sending our soldiers off to war, when it comes to the decisions we're making with our national security. It's important for us to have a strong dialectic with regard to our officer corps, with the civilian leadership, and with our citizenry. And I'd be an advocate for questions, because then when we do that, we hold our politicians accountable, and that makes better democracy.
In this debate, though, they've questioned the intelligence of the president, the competence of the military leaders. Is the political dialogue in this country too incivil now? Representative Cannon?
You know, I think it is, and it's not just left or right. It's not the liberal media. It's also the talk show hosts who become harsh. I'm amazed at how many people tell me these days that they've stopped listening to some of the popular talk show hosts because of the harshness, because it's just deteriorated. On the other hand, there is harshness, as you pointed out. You know, the president is actually a very, very smart guy. He may be dyslexic. He's never admitted that, but I think he's probably dyslexic. But the attacks on his person are astonishing. Now, it's not like they're without precedent. We've attacked Thomas Jefferson and even George Washington. So attacks are okay, but they're much harsher these days than they have been historically, I believe.
Mr. Burridge?
I'm not interested in ad hominem attacks on whether it's President Clinton or President Bush. They're meaningless to me because I'm a pragmatist. I want to know what's going to happen in our public policy, what's going to happen to the future of American citizens. And there is a lot of buzz and noise, and there are political machines on the right and on the left that do this, and they have political consequences. I fundamentally try to ignore those. I'm more interested in looking at a sound-based policy approach that's going to be best for my constituents and best for the American people, and that's what I'll advocate for in Congress.
Okay, this will be the last question, and I'll ask you, you for 30-second responses instead of 1 minute, if that's all right. Mr. Wright?
Thank you. I'd like to turn to the question of what happens specifically in the House if the Republicans lose control of the House. And I'm not making a prediction here at all. I'm just curious about your views. Representative Cannon, how would your role change specifically if control of the House shifts to the Democrats? And Mr. Burridge, if you win, how would you envision your new role with your colleagues as you represent a very conservative district?
First, Mr. Burridge.
Well, I would take a lot of the role and example of what Jim Matheson has done in the Congress. He's been quite successful in getting on committees and being an independent voice for Washington. I think it's quite likely that the Democrats are going to take control of the House, and I think that's going to be an advantage for electing me because I will be in the party that will be in control, and we need to have independent voices in the majority party to reflect our values, to have a seat at the table, and I think it's important for us to consider that when we choose whom we're going to elect.
Representative Cannon.
Interestingly, most of my day-to-day activity won't change. I chair the Committee on Commercial and Administrative Law. We're rethinking the Administrative Procedure Act. We're rethinking many of the rules about how we operate. I work very closely with Mel Watt, my ranking member. I suspect he would be the chairman. I think we would probably just continue on the same course in that committee. I think those are remarkably important issues, by the way. And then, of course, to the degree there were an impeachment proceeding, I would be involved in the opposition to that. And that would probably take a lot of my time and be very painful.
We've reached the point in the debate for 1-minute closing statements from each candidate. Before the program began, we tossed a coin to see who would have the last word. Mr. Burridge won the toss, and we'll hear first from Representative Cannon.
Thank you, Professor Patterson, for hosting us here today and the panel for your questions. They were insightful. This is an interesting debate, and I think most of the viewers have enjoyed it. In fact, my sense is that viewers just flip from channel to channel and watch the debate for a moment, but this has been aggressive enough that I think maybe many people actually watch this debate. I would just like to end by saying that I appreciate the public spirit that is involved in watching a debate. I think it's absolutely clear that Mr. Burridge and I are radically different on many issues. He believes in creating an environment where business has to do things, where they have to pay money, where they get enforced against if they don't know whether or not they've hired someone who's illegal. He would force them to do medical insurance and other kinds of things that I think the market freely will do in a much better fashion than that. And so I would ask you for your vote and remind you to vote on November 7th. Thank you.
I would like to thank Congressman Cannon and the panel this evening for joining us. The Constitution was founded by individuals that wanted to protect individual rights, not only from intrusive government, but also unrestrained commerce. That's why the Congress's most powerful power comes from the Commerce Clause. It's important for us to stand up for individuals, and any extreme on one side of the aisle is bad for commerce and bad for individuals. We need a reason-based approach when it comes to protecting our families here in Utah. I'm much like many of the families in my district. I'm a young father of 2 children. I've got a mortgage, student loans, and car payments. I'm not a millionaire. I'm much like you. I am a consumer advocate, and I take that role very seriously. I feel that we need someone to go back to Congress and fight for individual rights. That's my philosophy, and that's what I'll do if I'm fortunate enough to be elected to Congress. My name is Christian Burridge. I'm running for U.S. Congress in the 3rd District. I ask for your vote.